Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the massive battleship called Thunderstrike and watched as stars appeared around them after jumping through hyperspace. The ship was huge and stretched over 2 kilometers long, with weapons that no alien had ever seen before. Jake had gray hair and hard eyes that showed he had seen many battles in his life. His uniform was clean and pressed, but his hands showed the scars of a man who had worked his way up from the bottom ranks. Lieutenant Amy Brooks sat at her station, and her fingers moved quickly across the bright screens in front of her. She was young, with brown hair tied back and smart eyes that missed nothing. Amy had graduated top of her class at the Earth Naval Academy, and this was her first mission into deep space where other alien species lived. Her heart beat fast with excitement and fear because she knew this mission would change everything for humanity. The bridge was dark except for the glow of computer screens and the large window that showed space in front of them. Commander Paul Davis walked up to Jake with a serious look on his face. Paul was tall and thin with blonde hair and had been Jake's friend for over 20 years. They had served together on 3 different ships, and Paul knew Jake better than anyone else in the fleet. Paul held a datapad in his hands and spoke quietly so only Jake could hear him. 3 human colonies had stopped sending messages to Earth in the past month, and nobody knew what had happened to them. The Galactic Council claimed it was just paperwork problems, but Earth's intelligence services had found evidence that something much worse was happening. The colonies had over 50,000 people living on them, including families with children. Jake's jaw became tight as he read the report on Paul's datapad. For 50 years, humanity had been the newest member of the galactic community, but they were treated like second-class citizens. The older alien species gave humans the worst planets to live on while they kept the good ones for themselves. Humans were told to be grateful for what they got and to remember their place in the galaxy. But when human civilians started disappearing, Earth's government decided they had been pushed too far. Amy looked up from her station with wide eyes and said that they were getting a message from the Galactic Council. Her voice shook a little because she knew this was the moment everything would change. The message was coming through on the emergency channel, which meant it was very important. The main screen lit up and showed the inside of a large room filled with alien creatures from many different worlds. In the center stood Chancellor Vextar, who looked like a giant insect with a body made of crystal. His 4 arms moved as he spoke, and his voice came through the translation system with a tone that showed he thought humans were beneath him. Behind him stood representatives from 12 other alien species, and they all looked at the human ship with expressions that ranged from boredom to disgust. Chancellor Vextar's translated voice filled the bridge, and he told Jake that the human ship must turn off all weapons and let alien soldiers come aboard. He said that humanity had broken the agreements they had signed when they first joined the galactic community. His tone made it clear that he expected Jake to obey without question, like humans always had before. Jake stepped forward, and his boots made soft sounds on the metal floor of the bridge. He was not tall, but he carried himself like a man who had never backed down from a fight. Jake introduced himself politely and said they were there to find out what had happened to the missing human colonists. His voice was calm, but everyone on the bridge could hear the steel underneath his words. The aliens on the screen made sounds that might have been laughter, and Chancellor Vextar said that the human colonists had chosen to move somewhere else, and it was none of Earth's business. He told Jake again to surrender or face the consequences of disobeying the Galactic Council. The way he said it made it clear that he thought humans were too weak and scared to fight back. Lieutenant Danny Park sat at the tactical station, and his eyes went wide as he looked at his screens. Danny was small and quick with black hair and had the best eyes for spotting enemy ships in the entire fleet. He looked up at Jake and reported that over 200 alien warships were moving toward their position. The ships came from many different species, and they were all armed with powerful weapons designed to destroy entire cities. Jake never changed his expression, even though his ship was now surrounded by enemies. He had spent his whole career preparing for this moment, when humanity would have to stand up for itself. Jake told Amy to send a message to the alien fleet saying that humans had come to talk, but if the aliens wanted to fight, then Earth was ready for war. The alien fleet began to form an attack pattern around the lone human ship, and their commanders felt confident because they had so many more ships. They had fought wars for thousands of years and had conquered dozens of worlds. What they did not know was that humans had spent the last 50 years studying every battle the aliens had ever fought. Earth's military had learned all their tactics and weaknesses and had built weapons specifically designed to defeat them. Jake looked around his bridge at the young men and women who served under him, and he felt proud of how calm they stayed, even though they were about to face impossible odds. These officers had trained their whole lives for this moment, and they were ready to show the galaxy what humans could do when they were pushed too far. The alien ships finished forming their battle formation, and Jake knew that in a few minutes the shooting would start. He had hoped they could solve this problem with words, but the aliens had made their choice when they took human civilians. Now Earth would show the galaxy that humanity was no longer asking for respect, but demanding it. Jake gave the order to prepare for battle, and the bridge became busy as his crew got ready for the fight of their lives. The Thunderstrike was alone against 200 enemy ships, but Jake was not worried because he knew something the aliens did not. Humans did not fight fair, and they did not give up, and today the galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. The first attack came from a group of silver ships that looked like teardrops floating in space, and belonged to a species called the Zephyrians. These aliens had been fighting wars for over 3,000 years, and their ships carried enough firepower to turn entire mountains into glass. Bright beams of energy shot through space toward the Thunderstrike, and the alien commanders expected to see the human ship explode in the first few seconds of battle. Chief Engineer Lisa Carter sat at her station and watched the energy readings on her screens as the alien weapons hit their ship. Lisa had red hair and freckles and had spent 15 years working on Earth's most advanced spacecraft. She called out that their shields were holding at 98%, and the alien energy weapons were barely scratching their armor. Her voice showed surprise because even she had not expected their defenses to work this well. Jake allowed himself a small smile as he watched the alien energy beams splash harmlessly against his ship's hull. While the aliens had spent centuries perfecting energy weapons, humans had developed something completely different during the 50 years they had been ignored by the galaxy. Earth's scientists had created kinetic barriers and reactive armor that made the most advanced alien plasma cannons look like flashlights. Jake gave the order to return fire and told his crew to show the aliens what happened when they cornered a predator. The response from the Thunderstrike was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Instead of pretty energy beams, the human ship unleashed a storm of metal slugs that had been accelerated to incredible speeds using magnetic fields. Each piece of tungsten metal was moving at a large fraction of the speed of light and carried more destructive power than most alien missiles. The Zephyrian ships had been built to fight against energy weapons and had no defense at all against solid objects moving at such extreme speeds. 3 of their cruisers simply disappeared as the tungsten slugs tore through them at the molecular level. The remaining Zephyrian ships scattered in panic as their commanders tried to understand what had just happened to their supposedly invincible vessels. Captain Lor Andis of the Nexus Empire screamed over the communication channels, and his translated voice was filled with horror as he asked what kind of barbarians these humans were. He had expected a quick victory against primitive aliens, but instead had watched 3 advanced warships get destroyed in seconds by weapons that seemed to ignore all the rules of civilized warfare. Commander Paul Davis stood next to Jake and monitored the battle from his position while keeping track of all the enemy ships on his tactical display. He told Jake that a massive Corvan dreadnought was moving to attack them from the side. The ship was 3 times larger than the Thunderstrike and had served as the backbone of galactic military power for hundreds of years. Its captain was War, leader Thaknor, who had never lost a single battle in 30 years of command. The Corvan dreadnought was an impressive sight as it moved through space toward the human ship. It stretched for over a mile and was covered in armor that could withstand the explosion of small stars. Its weapons could melt asteroids, and its shields had never been penetrated by any known weapon in the galaxy. Thaknor was confident that his ship could destroy the human vessel in single combat. Lieutenant Amy Brooks worked at her communication station and intercepted the messages being sent between the alien ships. She told Jake that the Corvan war leader wanted to settle the fight with personal combat between just their 2 ships. The winner would take all and the loser would be destroyed. It was an old tradition among warrior species, and Thaknor expected the humans to either accept the challenge or run away in fear. Jake's eyes showed something that might have been amusement as he considered the aliens' challenge. He told Amy, to send a message back to the war leader accepting the combat, but warning him that humans came from a world where they did not just fight to win battles. Humans fought to make sure their enemies would never want to fight them again. The message was polite but carried an undertone that made several alien captains feel nervous. The two massive ships turned toward each other and began a deadly dance. That would change how the entire galaxy thought about warfare. The other alien vessels moved back to give them room while their crews watched to see which ship would prove superior. Most of the aliens expected the Corvin dreadnought to win easily because it was so much larger and had such a fearsome reputation. Thaknor opened a communication channel to Jake, and his voice boomed across space as he offered the human captain one last chance to surrender. The war leader explained that his ship was legendary throughout the galaxy and had never been defeated in battle. He said that Jake's ship was impressive for such a primitive species, but it could not match the might of Corvin military tradition that had been perfected over centuries. Jake's response was calm and measured as he thanked the war leader for his courtesy, but explained that humans did not have military traditions like the other species in the galaxy. Instead, humans had military evolution, and evolution never stopped improving and adapting. The aliens listening to this conversation did not understand what Jake meant, but they would learn very soon. The space between the two great ships crackled with tension as both crews prepared for battle. On the Corvin dreadnought, hundreds of aliens worked at their stations getting ready to unleash devastating firepower. On the Thunderstrike, the human crew moved with quiet efficiency as they prepared weapons and tactics that had never been tested in real combat before. War leader Thaknor gave the order to attack, and his ship's massive plasma batteries began to charge up with enough energy to power entire cities. The alien crew was confident that their first attack would cripple or destroy the human ship, because nothing in the galaxy had ever survived the full firepower of a Corvin dreadnought. They were about to discover that humans had spent 50 years preparing for exactly this kind of fight. The battle between the two ships was about to begin, and the outcome would determine not just who won this single combat, but would reshape the balance of power throughout the entire galaxy. War leader Thaknor had commanded the huge Corvin battleship called Eternal Dominion for more than 30 years, and in all that time he had never lost a single fight. His ship was famous throughout the galaxy for its incredible energy shields and plasma cannons that could melt entire asteroids into glowing gas. Thaknor expected this battle with the primitive human vessel to end within just a few minutes. The war leader stood on his bridge surrounded by alien officers who looked like large bears covered in metallic fur, and their eyes glowed red when they became excited for battle. Thaknor's voice was deep and powerful as he spoke to Jake one final time over the communication system. He told the human captain that he would give him one last chance to surrender, because while Jake's ship was impressive for such a backward species, it could not possibly stand against the might of Corvin military power. Jake's answer came back calm and steady, without any trace of fear or doubt in his words. He thanked the war leader for being polite, but explained that Thaknor should understand something important about humans. Unlike the other species in the galaxy, humans did not follow ancient military traditions that stayed the same for thousands of years. Instead, humans practiced military evolution, which meant they never stopped learning and improving and changing their methods of war. The Eternal Dominion fired first, and its massive plasma weapons unleashed enough destructive energy to power a small star for several days. The beams of superheated matter struck the front of the Thunderstrike and created a light show so bright it could be seen from nearby solar systems. The alien crew cheered because they were certain that no ship could survive such incredible firepower. Chief Engineer Lisa Carter watched her instruments carefully as the enemy attack hit their vessel, and she reported that their shields had dropped to 70%, but were holding steady. More importantly, she told Jake that the alien targeting systems were completely predictable because they followed the same standard combat methods that had been used throughout the galaxy for centuries. This meant the humans could anticipate where the next attacks would come from. Jake nodded to Lieutenant Danny Park at the tactical station and told him to show the aliens why humans did not follow standard military rules like everyone else in the galaxy. Danny's fingers moved quickly across his controls as he prepared to launch a weapon system that the aliens had never encountered before. The young officer's face showed concentration as he made final adjustments to the targeting computers. The Thunderstrike's response looked almost harmless at first as the ship launched what appeared to be small metallic spheres about the size of basketballs. The Corvin officers laughed when they saw these objects on their screens because they assumed the humans were firing some kind of primitive explosive device that would barely scratch their mighty ship's armor. The Corvin aliens were completely wrong about what they were seeing. The metallic spheres were actually self-guided kinetic penetrators, and each one contained advanced computer systems and tiny rocket engines that could adjust their course during flight. These weapons had been designed specifically to defeat the kind of energy shields that protected every major warship in the galaxy. As the Eternal Dominion's shields absorbed and dispersed the energy from its own reflected plasma blasts, the small, human penetrators slipped through the energy barriers like they were not even there. The alien shield technology had been designed to stop particles and energy beams, but it could not affect solid objects that were moving below a certain speed threshold. Thaknor roared in disbelief as his massive ship began to shake and shudder, under multiple impacts from weapons that his shields could not stop. Emergency alarms sounded throughout the Corvin vessel as the penetrators struck critical systems and began causing cascade failures in the ship's power grid. The war leader demanded to know how energy shields could be bypassed by such simple-looking weapons. Commander Paul Davis monitored the damage being inflicted on the enemy ship and explained to Jake that the alien shields worked by dispersing energy across a wide area, but they were completely useless against solid matter that moved too slowly to register as a threat. The human penetrators were specifically designed to be too small and too slow for the alien defensive systems to recognize them as dangerous. The Eternal Dominion began to list to one side as more of its internal systems failed, and Thaknor realized that his superior firepower was useless if he could not hit his target effectively. In desperation, the war leader ordered his ship to ram the human vessel at full speed. If he could not destroy the Thunderstrike with weapons, then he would use his ship's massive size to crush the smaller human craft. Lieutenant Amy Brooks reported that the Corvin dreadnought was now on a collision course with their ship and impact would occur in less than 90 seconds. The massive alien vessel was accelerating directly toward them, and its size advantage meant that even a glancing blow would probably destroy the Thunderstrike. The young officer's voice remained steady, but everyone could hear the tension underneath her words. Jake's expression never changed as he gave orders for evasive maneuvers and told Lieutenant Park to prepare something called the Mjolnir package. As the Eternal Dominion rushed toward them like a mountain moving through space, the Thunderstrike suddenly accelerated at a 90-degree angle to the attack vector. The human ship's engines had been designed to operate at much higher acceleration than any alien vessel could withstand. The reason alien ships could not match human acceleration was that their crews would be killed by the extreme forces involved in such rapid changes of direction. Human bodies were much more resistant to high-gravity situations because Earth was a heavier world than most planets where intelligent life had evolved. This gave human ships a significant advantage in close combat maneuvering. At the same time that the Thunderstrike was dodging the ramming attack, it launched its ultimate weapon, which was a single tungsten rod 3 meters long and weighing 10 tons. The rod had been accelerated to 20% of the speed of light using magnetic fields and carried kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear explosion. The humans had nicknamed this weapon Mjolnir after the hammer carried by an ancient god from their mythology. The tungsten rod struck the Eternal Dominion exactly in the middle of its hull, and the impact released tremendous amounts of energy focused into a space no bigger than a baseball. The Corvin dreadnought had been built to withstand energy weapons and explosive charges, but it had never been designed to absorb the kind of focused kinetic impact that the human weapon delivered. The mighty alien warship split completely in half as its structural framework was overwhelmed by forces that it simply could not resist. Pieces of the once proud vessel scattered across space in an expanding cloud of debris, while the remaining alien fleet watched in complete shock and disbelief. A single human ship had just destroyed the most powerful and feared warship in the entire galaxy, using weapons and tactics that no one had ever seen before. The communication channels used by the alien fleet exploded with panicked voices as ship captains who had served in the military for decades suddenly found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. These were experienced warriors who had conquered entire worlds and subjugated dozens of different species, But now they were looking at a human ship that did not fight according to any rules they understood. Admiral Zarketh of the combined fleet was a member of an ancient race called the Ethereals, who were beings made of pure energy and considered themselves the most advanced species in the galaxy. His voice came over the emergency communication frequency and commanded the human ship to stop fighting immediately. The Admiral declared that Jake's actions were war crimes under the laws that governed all civilized species in the galaxy. Jake's response was broadcast on all frequencies so that every single alien ship could hear his words clearly, and there would be no confusion about humanity's position. He told the Admiral that humans had not started this fight, but they were definitely going to finish it. The alien species had taken human civilians from their homes, and the Galactic Council had threatened Earth's independence, and now they were learning why those had been serious mistakes. Lieutenant Amy Brooks looked up from her communication station with a pale face, but her eyes showed determination rather than fear. She reported that she was intercepting messages between the alien ships, and many of their captains were calling for reinforcements from their home worlds. However, several other captains were requesting permission to withdraw from the battle because they no longer felt confident about fighting the human vessel. Commander Paul Davis studied the tactical display which showed the positions of all the remaining enemy ships, and he pointed out that they were still outnumbered by more than 100 to 1. Even with all the advantages that human technology provided, those were still impossible odds for any single ship to overcome. Paul had served with Jake for 20 years and had never seen his captain back down from a fight, but this situation seemed hopeless. Jake smiled grimly as he looked at the alien fleet surrounding his ship and explained that Paul was thinking about the battle the same way the aliens were thinking about it. The enemy commanders saw numbers like how many ships they had and how many weapons each vessel carried and what their statistics said about firepower comparisons. But humans saw something completely different when they looked at the same situation. Jake gestured toward the main screen where pieces of the destroyed Corvin dreadnought still glowed with heat from the impact that had torn it apart. He told Paul that humans saw targets instead of numbers, and they identified weaknesses instead of counting strengths, and they looked for opportunities that others missed completely. More importantly, the alien fleet was no longer thinking like confident warriors who expected easy victory. The enemy ships began to move into what their military manuals called a traditional encirclement pattern, but their coordination was falling apart as fear spread through their ranks. Ship captains who had been absolutely certain of victory just minutes before were now arguing with each other about safe engagement distances and proper targeting priorities. The destruction of their most powerful vessel had shattered their confidence. Chief Engineer Lisa Carter's voice came over the internal communication system to report that the new reactor modifications were working perfectly, and the ship could maintain maximum power output for at least 6 more hours. She added that the aliens had no idea what other surprises the human ship was carrying, because Earth's engineers had been very busy during the 50 years that humanity was being ignored by the galaxy. Jake turned to Lieutenant Danny Park at the tactical station and asked if the special courier drones were ready for launch. These small unmanned spacecraft carried complete records of everything that had happened during the battle, along with detailed information about alien ship designs and tactical methods. The drones were designed to travel faster than any other vessel in the galaxy and could reach Earth in just a few days. Danny nodded and reported that each drone contained a full battle record and their current position in space, along with analysis of alien weaknesses that Earth's military would find very interesting. The young officer's hands were steady on his controls as he waited for Jake's command to send the precious information back to their home world. Jake gave the order to launch the courier drones toward Earth because humanity needed to know that their long period of patience and restraint had finally come to an end. If the crew of the Thunderstrike did not survive the coming battle, then Earth's government needed to understand exactly what had happened and how the aliens had responded to reasonable requests for information about missing human civilians. The small drones shot away from the Thunderstrike at incredible speed and disappeared into hyperspace, carrying news that would change the relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy forever. When Earth's leaders received these messages, they would understand that the time for diplomacy and compromise had passed, and humanity would need to prepare for total war. As the courier drones began their journey home, the Thunderstrike prepared for the next phase of battle against the remaining alien ships. Jake knew that his vessel had already accomplished something that many people would have thought impossible, by destroying the most feared warship in galactic history. But the real demonstration of human military capability was just beginning. The alien fleet was trying to reorganize itself after the shock of losing the Corvan dreadnought, but their commanders were making mistakes because they were scared and confused. They had expected to face a primitive species that would surrender quickly when confronted with superior numbers and firepower. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that used weapons and tactics they had never seen before. Jake looked around his bridge at the young officers who served under his command and felt proud of how calm and professional they remained, even though they were facing impossible odds. These men and women had trained their entire lives for moments like this, when humanity would need to stand up for itself against enemies who thought humans were weak and helpless. The alien ships finished forming their new attack formation, and Jake could see on his tactical display that they were preparing to launch a coordinated assault, using every weapon at their disposal. The enemy commanders hoped that sheer overwhelming firepower would succeed where individual ship duels had failed. They were about to discover that humans had prepared for this possibility too, and the worst part of their nightmare was still to come. Admiral Zarketh's combined fleet moved into their final attack formation with 200 of the galaxy's finest warships, creating a sphere of death around the single human vessel. These ships represented a dozen different species and centuries of military tradition, and their crews were preparing to end the human threat once and for all. The alien commanders felt confident that even the most advanced human technology could not overcome such overwhelming numbers. The aliens had no idea that they were flying directly into a carefully prepared trap that had been set during the earlier phases of the battle. While the enemy fleet had been focused on the dramatic destruction of individual ships, they had failed to notice small objects being deployed throughout the area where they were now gathering for their final assault. Captain Lixara of the Serpentine Confederacy called out to Admiral Zarketh that the human ship appeared to be powering down its weapon systems, and perhaps the primitive aliens had finally come to their senses. Her ship looked like a giant snake made of metal, and her crew had cold blood that made them very patient hunters. She assumed that Jake had realized his situation was hopeless and was preparing to surrender. Lieutenant Danny Park was not actually powering down the weapons, but instead was redistributing electrical power to systems that the alien sensors could not detect or understand. He reported quietly to Jake that all of the stealth mines were now in position, and the entire enemy formation was inside what he called the kill zone. The young tactical officer's voice remained calm, but his eyes showed the excitement of a predator about to strike. Jake stood in the center of his bridge, surrounded by officers who had trained their entire lives for this single moment when humanity would prove that they deserved respect from the other species in the galaxy. Earth had spent 50 years being underestimated and treated like a junior partner in galactic affairs. But today, that period of humiliation would end forever. Jake ordered Lieutenant Amy Brooks to open a communication channel to every ship in the alien fleet so that there would be no confusion about what was about to happen. Amy's fingers moved across her controls, and she reported that all enemy vessels were receiving the signal clearly. Her voice was steady, but everyone on the bridge could feel the tension as they prepared for the final phase of their plan. Jake's voice carried across the void of space to reach every alien captain, and his words were translated into dozens of different languages but lost none of their intensity or meaning. He identified himself and his ship and then began to explain why the aliens had made a terrible mistake by threatening humanity and taking human civilians from their homes. He paused to let his words sink in before continuing and told the assembled alien fleet that they had come to this place because they thought humans were weak and alone and would submit to superior force without fighting back. Jake's voice became harder as he explained that the aliens had been wrong about everything they believed concerning humanity and Earth's capabilities. Jake continued by saying that Earth had been watching and learning and preparing during all the years when humanity was being ignored and dismissed by the galactic community. Human scientists and military experts had studied every alien species and every type of warship and every tactical method used throughout the galaxy. Most importantly, they had been building not just better weapons, but an entirely new and superior way of conducting warfare. Admiral Zarketh's energy form flickered with anger as he interrupted Jake's speech to declare that human words meant nothing. when faced with the combined might of the galactic community. The Admiral commanded Jake to surrender immediately and promised that if he obeyed, then his death would be swift and painless. The alien leader's voice showed his complete confidence that victory was inevitable. Jake's smile was as cold as the empty space around them as he responded to the Admiral's threat with a simple question about whether the aliens really wanted to see what humans had learned during 50 years of being underestimated and dismissed. He looked at Lieutenant Park and gave a single nod that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The space around the alien fleet suddenly erupted in brilliant explosions as hundreds of stealth mines that had been deployed during the running battle detonated simultaneously. These were not conventional explosive devices, but rather gravity bombs that created localized distortions in the fabric of space itself. The mines had been invisible to alien sensors because they used technology that no other species had ever developed. Alien ships found themselves being pulled in impossible directions as the fundamental forces of physics were temporarily altered around them. Energy shields that were designed to deflect particles and energy beams offered no protection whatsoever against gravitational forces that could bend space and time. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before were now colliding with each other as their formations collapsed into chaos. Captain Morduke of the Titan Hegemony screamed over the communication channels as his massive vessel was crushed by its own weight when an artificial gravity field made his ship suddenly weigh 10 times more than normal. His voice was filled with terror as he demanded to know what kind of impossible science the humans were using against them. Commander Paul Davis monitored the destruction with professional satisfaction as he reported that 60% of the enemy fleet had been disabled or destroyed in the first wave of attacks. The surviving alien ships were breaking formation and trying to escape from the gravity fields that were tearing their vessels apart. The coordination that had made them dangerous was completely gone. But Jake was not finished with his demonstration of human military superiority, and he told Amy to establish a communication link with the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime, so that every alien leader could witness what was happening. As the link was established showing the council chambers where terrified aliens watched in horror, Jake prepared to show them something even more impressive. The Thunderstrike launched. A new type of projectile, but instead of aiming at the remaining enemy ships, Jake targeted empty areas of space behind them. These projectiles were artificial black holes that lasted only a few seconds, but created gravitational lenses that could bend light and energy in ways that seemed to violate the laws of physics. When the Thunderstrike fired its main energy weapons, through these gravitational lenses, the beams twisted and curved through space before emerging behind the alien ships, to strike them from directions that should have been impossible. The enemy vessels had no defense against attacks that came from angles their shields were not designed to protect. Chancellor Vextar's translated voice was filled with pure terror, as he declared that humans could not possibly manipulate space and time because their technology level was supposed to be barely above primitive. His crystalline body shook with fear as he watched weapons that his species could not even comprehend destroying ships that had seemed invincible. Jake's response echoed through the council chambers and across every surviving alien ship as he corrected the Chancellor's assumptions about human capabilities. He explained that thinking humans were primitive had been their first mistake, and threatening human civilians had been their second mistake, and assuming that humans would fight according to alien rules had been their third and final mistake. Jake gestured toward the tactical display where alien ships were fleeing in all directions, with their formations shattered and their confidence completely destroyed. He told the Chancellor that humans did not fight fair because fairness was a luxury they could not afford when protecting their people. Humans fought to win, and they fought to ensure that anyone who threatened humanity would think very carefully before trying it again. As the last alien ships jumped into hyperspace, carrying news of humanity's true military capabilities back to their homeworlds, Jake turned to address his crew. These young men and women had just participated in a battle that would change the course of galactic history and establish humanity as a power that could no longer be ignored or dismissed. Jake gave the order to set course for the missing human colonies because their primary mission was to bring their people home safely. But as the Thunderstrike jumped into hyperspace, every alien species in the galaxy was receiving the same message through their fleeing ships. Humanity was no longer asking politely for respect and fair treatment, but was demanding it with the power to enforce those demands. The age when humans could be pushed around was over, and the galaxy would never be the same again.